Welcome to Lisa's Dialogue. Today, I'm so pleased to have my friend Carol Cain on the show. She's an award-winning journalist, producer, and host for Michigan Matters. Carol, how are you? I hope you are doing well.
Lisa, it's so nice to be with you. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you. We've been really busy. Have been helping the first line workers. You were at the president's tour at Ford. Why did the president come to Michigan and Ford? How did you get invited with the national press pool?
So Lisa, as you know, because you've covered very high-level leader meetings, you apply to be, as a media person, invited to be part of the entourage, if you will. And I applied, and they selected me to be the only local broadcast journalist to join the national journalists who travel with the president and follow him when he came to Michigan last week and visited a Ford plant where they're making ventilators. So I was with him from the time Air Force One landed until Air Force One took off again from Metro Airport, which is about 20 minutes outside of where the Ford plant was in Rawsonville.
At the tour, it seems that the president liked your question a lot. What question did you ask? And how did you feel you get the president to pick your question twice?
The president took an official tour of the Ford plant with Bill Ford, who is the executive chairman of Ford Motor Company. The president started off with a roundtable of African-American leaders and talked about the COVID crisis with them. And then after that, then we all went with him on the tour of the Ford plant to see where they immediately, in a matter of days, transformed from making automotive components to ventilators, which you and your viewers know is needed in this battle against the COVID-19 crisis. So along the way, media followed him as he toured, and as he was there, he took two of my questions. I was the only one that asked the question starting. I asked him what it was like to see these plants, which overnight went from making one thing to another and showing the incredible sophistication and ingenuity of American manufacturing here. And he talked about that. And also Bill Ford, again, who is the leader of Ford, answered questions as well. So we talked about that. And he was so impressed to see all the things that Ford was doing. But Lisa, as you know, with these events, there's always a political backdrop to them. And the president, this is his third time out of the White House visiting a PPE manufacturer in important states to him in this November election, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. So he came here and he talked about that as well.
Is this your first time met the president?
Yeah, well, you know, I interviewed the president many years ago. He actually worked
when he was not president.
When he was not president, before he was president, before he was just starting to get famous. He was a New York real estate magnate and was working with Cadillac, the automaker in Detroit, on a new limousine called the Trump limousine. And I interviewed him, 30 years ago. And so that was my last conversation with him directly. So we did not talk about that when we talked on last week, but he really likes cars. And in fact, he wanted to see some of the Ford GTs that were being made and asked to see some of them on his tour in a private meeting with Bill Ford before he started his official tour.
So you interviewed him 30 years ago.
30 years ago and then now.
Him, now, what is the difference?
Well, he's a lot more famous now than he was then. He's president. The other thing he did, Lisa, which I was kind of surprised, he walked over to me from when they were taking the tour. He then walked over towards me and he gave me his face shield that Ford had given him. This is the face shield that the president gave me. It has a Ford Motor Company sign on it and handed it to me. And,
we all saw on that tape. How did you feel at that moment?
I was so surprised by that because I was sitting there talking to him, and he walks over and gives it to me. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I was talking to him. I was holding a microphone doing the interview, and we had social distancing. So it was a very long stick microphone, very heavy as well. And then my purse. So I took what little freehand I had and held on to it and kept talking. But the president doesn't normally do questions like that. Usually it's a press pool at the end of the event or at the start. So this was very unique that he took time to do. And I did also write about our exchange in my Detroit Free Press column, which I wrote about his visit.
When you interviewed him 30 years ago, at that time, in terms of his personality, his, just the way he presented himself, any difference?
Well, when I interviewed him 30 years ago, he also was a big personality, very strong personality. And Donald Trump, the name Trump carried a lot of weight even back then. He was putting his name on buildings. He was building his empire. Now, this was before he became a reality TV star and certainly president. He was very sure of himself. And he was the perfect person, because he was rich back then, to know what people wanted out of their limousine. So we talked about the limousine, like there was a fax machine in the car, which back then, 30 years ago, was unheard of. This was breakthrough things. So flash forward 30 years ago, last week when I talked with him, same thing, big personality, very sure of himself, and certainly knows how to get attention. He is a master at getting attention.
What question did you ask him 30 years ago?
I asked him what it was like creating a limousine and what kinds of things he liked in the limousine. So he talked about, again, putting in special. There were TV sets, there were telephones, which again, long time ago, these were not normal in most limousines back then, but he wanted all the extra bells and whistles, the perks, phones, fax machine, telephone. It was a very nice limousine, and in fact, gained a lot of national, international attention back in the day.
Carol, you have received awards for your work on Michigan-China relations. Can you tell us about this?
So I have received Emmys for the documentary TV special I did on building bridges between China and Michigan, called Building Bridges from the Great Lakes to the Great Wall. We went to China and we went around Michigan, and we talked to people, leaders, politicians, the governor, the leaders, about building and more bridges that needed to be built between the two places. So we talked to educators, the presidents of universities, and I do know that even back then, when I did my special, it's very important. Michigan's future is tied to China and vice versa. I think Michigan is certainly on China's screen as a place that's important because of the auto industry, because of our travel and tourism industry, our agriculture. There are many, many ties and connections, which is what we focused on. We showed how agriculture, we showed how the auto companies, how the universities were looking to build two-way economic links back and forth, not just benefiting Michigan or China, but mutually beneficial relationships. And it's a process that takes a long time to do, as we know. And certainly that's what we focused on in our special.
Before the pandemic, US-China relations, it seems to be getting better. But now, based on some messages coming out of Washington, it does not look good. You have interviewed many local politicians and business leaders. Do you think this will affect Michigan and China relations?
When it comes to relations between China and the US, I think the conversation between Washington and Beijing has been very fiery, if you will. I think this pandemic, the virus, is another problem area. And I know China has said some things about America and possibly Americans being involved in its spread. And the president, in fact, when he was here last week in Michigan, he referred to the virus as the Chinese virus numerous times. But here's what I know about it, is that this virus has already claimed over 100,000 American lives. Over 1 million people have died in China, other places. I think the way we're going to find a cure or find a way to deal with this crisis is to work better together. But certainly, Lisa, your question about has this caused strains for Asian Americans, and I know that's true because I've heard that from people, that things have been said. And whenever you have a situation where there's something scary like a pandemic, it scares people. And I think people look for somebody to blame. And here's what I know, that Asian Americans are some of the strongest supporters of America in helping in this battle against COVID-19. I know you were kind enough, you're working on the front lines and making donations and masks and food and other things to help people here in the Metro Detroit, Michigan area to fight this pandemic. So the war of words that goes on between Beijing and Washington's one thing, but I think those of us here out in the heartland, it's a different conversation.
Do you think that will affect Michigan-China relations?
Honestly, I think what goes on between Washington and Beijing it can potentially, when you get to trade deals, and I know a new trade deal was reached just before the pandemic hit in an earnest way here earlier this year, a hybrid trade deal was reached. I think, again, that the United States, the leadership has to be smart enough to know that we want China as a friend, not as an enemy. The enemy here is COVID-19. And I do think, though, going forward, there's just, it's an ongoing relationship, and there's sometimes better times and not as good times. I think we're going through a tough time right now, but I truly think that better times will be ahead for Michigan and China and the US and China, because we're too important to each other. We need each other.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you, Lisa.
We definitely wanted to continue the conversation for other topics.
I appreciate it.
Everything goes well with you. Good luck for everything.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for all you're doing and helping in this COVID-19 battle. Congratulations again on that. And I look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you very much for watching. If you like our program, please subscribe. Thank you. See you next time.
在这个必须保持社交距离的时候，我们可以一起做一件事：完成2020年人口普查。你的回复对于医疗保健、公共设施和教育在未来10年的规划非常重要。现在上2020 census.gov， 花几分钟时间便可以带来改变。为了你的社区和开展美国的未来，即刻上2020 census.gov/languages 回复人口普查。